Good morning. This is Mary, and I will be reading to you this morning from the Fall River Reporter. Our first story. Ahead of the September 2nd compliance deadline for the new consumer protection regulations prohibiting junk fees, the Attorney General's office has released updated guidance and a webinar for help business people operating in Massachusetts comply with the regulations. Beginning September 2nd, these regulations become enforceable and businesses must come into compliance. Promulgated earlier in the year, the AGO's junk fee regulations help consumers understand the total cost of a product and service up front, avoid unnecessary charges, and easily cancel unwanted costs that may be optional, waivable, or unwanted, including costs related to trial and subscription offers. Additionally, by increasing price transparency and helping consumers to more easily compare prices while shopping, the regulations level the playing field for businesses. Junk fees are hidden, surprise, or unnecessary costs that increase the total price of a product beyond the advertised price. Businesses often do not disclose such fees, only disclose them at the end of a transaction or disclose them after consumers have provided their personal billing information. Similarly, some businesses have engaged in practices related to trial offers, subscriptions, and automatic and recurring charges to conceal the total cost and nature of a product or service while making it difficult for customers to cancel or opt out of such features. The Attorney General's office regulations make it clear that hidden junk fees and related practices violate the Massachusetts Consumer Protection Office. In clarifying that such practices are prohibited under the Consumer Protection Act, the AGO's regulations impose various regulations for businesses operating in Massachusetts, including rules that increase price and billing transparency and make it easier to avoid unnecessary or unwanted costs in relation to marketing and sales, trial offers and automatic renewals, and recurring charges and subscriptions. The regulations may be viewed in their entirety on the website. The AGO's junk fee regulations guidance has been issued to facilitate businesses' compliance with the regulations. The guidance has been updated to specifically circumstances under which industries may already be compliant with the regulations through compliance with separate consumer protections, and to answer frequently asked questions the AGO has received since announcing the new regulations. For example, the guidance answers the following questions most frequently asked. For example, can sellers still advertise discounts? For example, half price after 4 p.m. In the context of rental housing, how must a landlord disclose water and sewer charges? Do restaurants violate the regulations by imposing mandatory service charges for large parties? The updated guidance and answers to these and other questions may be viewed on the AGO's website. Additionally, the AGO has released a webinar to help businesses understand and comply with regulations. Businesses across industries must ensure compliance with the new regulations by September 2nd. Businesses that violate the regulations will be subject to legal enforcement action by the Attorney General, in addition to private legal actions under the state's consumer protection laws. Among other rules in marketing and sales, the regulations require businesses to clearly disclose the total price of a product, including any mandatory charges or fees whenever the pricing information is presented to a consumer and prior to requiring the consumer to provide their personal information. It requires the nature, purpose, and amount of any charges that may be imposed on the transaction, and they must clearly disclose whether any charges are optional or waivable, along with readily available instructions on how to avoid such charges. Whenever pricing information is presented to a consumer, businesses must also display the total price of a product more prominently than any other pricing information. When presenting a trial offer, the regulations require businesses to clearly disclose any charges the consumer may incur as a result of accepting the trial offer, any products for which charges may be incurred as a result of accepting the trial offer, instructions for the consumer to reject or cancel the trial offer before being charged, the calendar date by which a consumer must reject or cancel a trial offer to avoid being charged, and the calendar date on which a consumer will be charged if the consumer fails to reject or cancel a trial offer. Among other rules, prior to the purchase of a product involving a recurring charge or a subscription, the AGO's regulations require businesses to clearly disclose what consumers will be charged for and if any charges will increase after a certain period, including a trial period, if the charges will occur on a regular basis unless canceled by a consumer, and instructions on how to cancel a recurring charge or subscription. The AGO's regulations also require businesses to implement simple processes for consumers to cancel subscriptions and other recurring charges, including ensuring that consumers are able to cancel subscriptions just as easily as they were enabled to enroll in them. For example, if a consumer enrolls in a subscription through a website, they must be able to cancel the subscription through the same website. Additionally, the regulations require businesses to provide advance written notices regarding their subscriptions, including details of when a subscription will renew, how much the consumer will be charged, and when and how the consumer may cancel. The entirety of the Attorney General's junk fee regulations, promulgated as 94 CMR 38.00, may be viewed on their website. Consumers who believe they have been subject to unfair or deceptive business practices, including relations to the junk fee, may file a consumer complaint or call the Attorney General's Consumer Hotline at 617-727-8400. Our next headline: Police in Massachusetts addressed women with a Maryland addresses believed to be part of an organized crime group. Norwood Chief Christopher Padden reports that the Norwood Police Department pursued and arrested 6 Maryland women for alleged breaking and entering and related charges following an incident on Neponset Street last week. All 6 suspects, Mirabella Caldaro, 42, Yalala Chiochu, 41, Flavia Coladuro, 22, Emilia Saduro, 36, Michaela Eon, 33, and Elizabeth Sarudu, 21, had Maryland addresses and were charged with breaking and entry during the daytime for a felony, conspiracy, possession of burglarious instruments, and resisting arrest. On Friday, at approximately 12:50 p.m., Norwood police officers responded to a report of a residential break-in at a home in the area of Neponset Street. Upon arrival, officers spoke with residents who had returned home to find several female suspects inside the home. When confronted by the homeowners, the suspects fled to a waiting vehicle and left the area. Shortly after, Officer Adam Ossowski observed a vehicle matching the suspect description and attempted a motor vehicle stop. The operator failed to stop, initiating a brief pursuit that ended on Dean Street. 6 female subjects exited the vehicle and fled on foot in a nearby wooded area. Officer Ossowski pursued and apprehended 1 suspect. Norwood police officers quickly established a perimeter. Police officer Peter Fisk, operating in plain clothes, observed several of the suspects behind a business on Pleasant Street. When approached, the suspects fled again. A foot pursuit ensued, and Lieutenant J. Payne and Officer Fisk were able to take 2 more suspects into custody. Officer Sean Kelly, with the assistance of a Walpole Police Department detective, apprehended 2 additional suspects as they attempted to flee across a nearby river. The 6th subject was apprehended shortly thereafter. Thanks to the coordinated efforts of on-duty officers, specialized units, and mutual aid partners. All 6 subjects involved in the break-in were taken into custody, said Chief Padden. During booking, 2 suspects were found to have obscured or altered fingerprints, preventing initial identification. Norwood Police worked with Homeland Security investigations to confirm all suspects' identities. All 6 individuals have Maryland addresses, and several had active warrants from other states for similar offenses. Norwood police detectives are actively coordinating with other jurisdictions to investigate related crimes. The case remains under investigation. All 6 subjects were held without bail and transported to Dedham District Court for arraignment on Monday. Immigration and Customs Enforcement were notified and present at the court. 3 of the 6 were released on bail and immediately taken into ICE custody. 2 men who arrived at the court to post bail were also taken into ICE custody. 3 suspects remain held at this time. A preliminary investigation indicates that suspects are allegedly part of an organized crime group engaged in similar criminal activity across multiple states. All are related, including the 2 males who arrived to post bail. We commend the outstanding police work, teamwork, and interagency coordination that led to the safe and successful apprehension of all 6 suspects, said Chief Padden. Anyone with additional information regarding this group is urged to contact Detective Ryan Marchant at 339-364-9632. These are allegations. All suspects are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Our next headline, John Cena's father, pro wrestlers coming together in Fall River to help man who needs a kidney transplant. A night of high-octane action in Fall River is hoping to raise money for a good cause. House of Bricks Pro Wrestling returns with Hobo Caged by the Bay, taking place on Saturday, August 16th at the King Philip Yacht Club, 1 Club Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. Appearances and matches may include Hobe Commissioner John Cena Sr. will be in the house, bringing his signature charisma and leadership to the evening. HOB heavyweight champion, the Thunder from Under, Michael Foster, defending his title in what promises to be a thunderous showdown. Entitled Austin James Phoenix versus the King of New England, BMT Brendan Michael Thomas in a steel cage match. HOB Southern New England champion, the Outlaw Moonshiner, J.B. Tickle, brings his gritty style to the ring. HOB Women's Championship 4-way melee with suplex sweetheart Isana versus Wolfeye Nashoba Nayara versus Portuguese Powderhouse Ariel versus Roxanne Fury. Also appearing from 1420 WBSM, Tim Weisberg, the voice of HOB, Hardcore Jesus, Anthony Stone, Greatness himself, Chad Epic and his initiative, and more surprises to be announced. Gates will open at 6 p.m., with the first bell ringing at 7 p.m. sharp. All tickets are just $15, with proceeds going directly to support Michael Blachar in his courageous battle for a kidney transplant. There is more than a wrestling show here. It's a community rallying behind one of its own. To learn more about Michael or to contribute to his GoFundMe fundraiser, please contact them. Our next headline, Pro Bowling Tour coming to Rhode Island and Massachusetts border this weekend. The Duck Pin Pro Tour is coming to the Rhode Island-Massachusetts border this weekend. The 5th Duck Pin Professional Bowlers Association tour stop for the 2025 season will be hosted at Dudek Lanes in Warren, Rhode Island from August 1st to August 3rd. This will be an 8-game event. In addition to bowlers coming from other states, many from Fall River, Swansea, and Somerset areas and across Massachusetts will also be participating. If you want to check out the action, Qualifying rounds are Friday night starting at 6:30 p.m., Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m., and then at 1:30 p.m., depending on the number of entries. The top bowlers return on Sunday to battle for the title. If you think you have what it takes to compete, the best prize is $2,200. Our next headline, Massachusetts bill will enable cities and towns to limit rent increases. Hundreds of tenants from across Massachusetts descended on Beacon Hill Tuesday to show their support for perennial rent stabilization legislation, which proponents see as a crucial and more immediate tool to tackle the housing affordability crisis, even as the Healey administration focuses its efforts on boosting housing production. Advocates' early afternoon rally on the Grand Staircase came just ahead of a Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government hearing that featured lengthy testimony on Senate Pat Jalen's bill to enable cities and towns to limit rent increases to the rate of inflation with a cap of 5%. It also bans no-fault evictions. Homes for All Massachusetts, which represents housing justice groups statewide, said tenants came from a slew of so-called gateway cities, including Springfield, Worcester, Lynn, Brockton, Somerville, New Bedford, Fall River, and Taunton. Jalen, a Somerville Democrat, who was joined by Mayor Katanya Ballantyne, asked ralliers to raise their hands if they think Massachusetts has a housing emergency. We need immediate solutions. This is it. Building more housing is not fast enough, Jalen said. It costs too much. It's not happening fast enough, and it won't solve the problem. Jalen's proposal incorporates exemptions for owner-occupied buildings with 4 or fewer units, public and subsidized housing, college dorms, newly constructed buildings for 5 years, and facilities that provide residential elderly care. 17 lawmakers have signed on to the bill. The legislature and Governor Maura Healey last session teamed up to pass major new housing production law, and in the process left rent control proposals, which are opposed by the real estate lobby, on the sidelines. Healey's capital investment plan for fiscal years 2026 through 2030 calls for housing investments totaling $2.3 billion. The administration says CIP funding in fiscal 2026 will drive down housing costs by helping to create more than 6,000 new units. But to end the housing crisis, Massachusetts needs to produce 222,000 new homes by 2035, according to the statewide housing plan, which was released in February. Mindy Perry, a small landlord in Boston who testified on a panel with the Small Property Owners Association, offered the opposite argument of Jalen during the hearing on Tuesday. Rent control is not going to solve the problem of housing, of rent price. It's going to do the exact opposite, Perry told lawmakers. It's going to devastate the housing supply and drive the rent price even higher. The only way to solve this is to increase the housing supply. Tony Lopez, who also spoke on the SBOA's panel, argued Jalen's bill reaches for the wrong tool. Lopes invoked rent control lessons from San Francisco and New York City, which he claimed led to the loss of rental units and discouraged investment and maintenance. This bill may be well-intentioned, but the outcome will have fewer available units, deteriorating housing conditions, and owners walking away from reinvestment in all the housing stock that needs care, Lopez said. And it penalizes the small property owners who make up 60% or more of the Commonwealth's rental market, including the immigrant and minority property owners who are seeking just to get ahead. We need to consider real solutions, zoning reform, more state-level housing production, and accountability for the rising cost of insurance. Committee member Representative Mike Conley bristled at the property owner's testimony and defended rent stabilization as a moderate policy. The Cambridge Democrat noted the legislature passed the state's first rent control measures in 1920, a policy also in place during World War II. We had it in the 1950s, we had it from 1970 to 1994, and so, as a matter of fact, the longest period we've ever gone without rent stabilization is the current period. And I think we would all agree the housing emergency is worse than it's ever been to our knowledge, Conley said. I looked at New York City since the time they started implementing rent control, and we know there's a partial form of rent control in New York City. They've added over 1 million housing units, so you can't tell me that we can't balance the need to protect tenants with growth. The Housing Campion Rent Stabilization Bill from Representatives Dave Rogers and Samantha Montano was initially also sent to the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, though it was redirected to the Housing Committee earlier this month and is awaiting a hearing. Rent control legislation was sent to study last session, part of a long-standing trend in which top Democrats have eschewed such measures, including a Boston Home Rule petition. A 1994 ballot referendum banned rent control in Massachusetts. Renters recently gained some relief after the fiscal 2026 budget banned rent-paid brokers' fees, seen as a burdensome, additionally moving costs to many tenants. I think the fact that we got brokers' fees through is a changing of the tide, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to advance something during this time, Montano, a Jamaica Plain Democrat, told the news service. I'm very, very stressed about housing, especially in my community. Montano said her office has fielded a significant volume of unemployment cases lately. I think we're starting to see incredibly dire repercussions from the federal administration, Montano said. Carolyn Chow, executive director of Homes for All Massachusetts, framed the rent stabilization as a no-cost solution that will support residents who are bracing for the personal impact of federal funding cuts. Hundreds of thousands of Bay Staters are expected to lose access to food assistance program and health insurance coverage unless state government steps in with additional resources for the safety net programs. This is not going to increase the state budget. It's regulating market rate rents, Chow told the news service. Housing is a fundamental for people to be able to live and survive and thrive here in the state. As other benefits are being cut, we need to make sure that people's rents are not ballooning at the same time. At the rally, which was moved indoors due to the heat, Boston City Councilor Ben Weber held a sign demanding rent control now on the grand staircase. Some 5,000 Boston public school students experienced homelessness each year, and that situation is only worsening, Webb said, as he pushed for politics to reduce evictions. If elected officials aren't doing something to prevent it, we're not doing our jobs, Weber told the news service. Some 441,000 low-income households across the state lack access to affordable rental home, according to research released in April from Housing Navigator Massachusetts, Inc. and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. That translates into the existing affordable housing stock serving just 32% of low-income households. Imagine if the cities had the legal power to do what already we know works: stabilize rent, stop displacement. Ballantyne, the mayor of Somerville, said at a rally, "Inside this building, lawmakers are deciding whether we can take that step, whether we can pass rent control and finally give cities and towns the tools to protect their people. But out here, we're making it clear. The people are ready, the cities are ready, the time is now." At the hearing, Revere City Council Juan Pablo Jaramillo said he believes housing development is a tool to lower rents, but with a caveat. That's not something that we're benefiting from in the working class community of Revere, said Yamodello, who's also Deputy Legislative Director at SEIU Local 409. It's time to pass State Law 1447 and level the playing field for working class people. This bill is about doing away with the power dynamic that is encouraged by the law that discourages and inhibits working people from choosing if rent control is right for their own community. Our next headline, 81-year-old Massachusetts man was released on personal recognizance concerning wrong-way crash that killed an 18-year-old. Lawrence Hayes, 81, of Reading, was arraigned today in connection to a crash that occurred on the A. Piatt Andrew Bridge on Route 128 in Gloucester at approximately 1:30 a.m. on June 30th, the Office of Essex County District Attorney Paul Tucker confirms. Hayes was charged with motor vehicle homicide by reckless operation, a felony, and 2 civil motor vehicle infractions. He pled not guilty in Gloucester District Court before the Honorable Michael Patton and was released on personal recognizance with the conditions of home confinement and GPS monitoring and no driving. Authorities allege that Hayes, the operator and sole occupant of his 2020 Honda CR-V, was driving northbound in a southbound lane when his vehicle struck a 2011 Toyota Corolla driving southbound. The Corolla was operated by a 19-year-old female and also contained another 19-year-old female passenger and 2 18-year-old male passengers. All individuals involved in the crash were transported to area hospitals. One of the occupants of the Corolla, Christopher Daly, 18, of Gloucester, passed away on July 4th as a result of the severe injuries he sustained. The other 3 teens in the Corolla were also Gloucester residents. The Gloucester Police Department, the Gloucester Fire Department responded to the crash. In addition to the Office of Essex County District Attorney, the incident is under investigation by the Massachusetts State Police, Troop A detectives, MSP Danvers, MSP Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Section, the Massachusetts State Police Crime Scene Services, and the Office of the Medical Examiner. According to a GoFundMe fundraiser, Chris had an infectious smile that lit up every room and a personality that brought joy and laughter to everyone around him. He was the life of the party, the dependable friend, the loving son and brother, the kind of young man you never forget. Chris was more than just a great athlete and student. He was a generous soul who never hesitated to lend a hand, whether he was mowing his grandmother's lawn, mentoring younger athletes, helping a friend in need, or volunteering his time. Chris gave freely and wholeheartedly. He was excited to begin his college journey at Coastal Carolina this fall, and he had so much to look forward to. In his final act of generosity, Chris became an organ donor, saving 5 lives and giving 5 families a future they might not have had. That selfless gift is a reflection of the kind of person he was, caring, courageous, and full of heart. In the Gloucester District Court today, Assistant District Attorney Patrick Collins handled the arraignment on behalf of the Commonwealth. Hayes was represented by attorney Robert Skedeltoff. Hayes is scheduled to return to court for a pretrial hearing on September 23rd. This has been Mary reading to you from the Fall River Reporter. I wish you all a good day.